What's happening, everybody? Welcome to day 2 of Emerge.
So exciting to be here at the first ever Emerge Virtual Cannabis Conference, and we are your hosts.
Yeah, my name is Mike Glazer.
I'm Mary Jane Gibson.
Together we host the podcast Weed and Grub.
Check it out. We have such a great time smoking, snacking, hanging, and talking to cool folks.
Yeah, come hang with us, and also hang with a bunch of really great people today on panels. Like at 10:30, we have Jim Belushi in Auditorium B.
At 12:30, also in Auditorium B, we have a panel on women in cultivation and manufacturing.
Yeah, and then at 3 p.m., don't miss a panel on cannabis beverages.
And at 6:30, make sure you catch clips from the film CBD Nation with a live Q&A with Andrew D'Angelo.
I'm really looking forward to that.
Me too.
Yeah, if you want to check out the agenda at any time, you can always go to emergecanna.com.
Our first panel today is in Auditorium C.
So, check out End of the Cycle, Overcoming Oppression and Cannabis Prisoner Restitution, moderated by Christopher Foltz.
And we'll see you out there.
Yeah, bye.
Hi, everyone. This is Chris Foltz with Sensi Media and Sensi Magazine. I'm the Vice President of Global Reach, which literally means I get the opportunity of sitting down and having conversations with the coolest people in the cannabis and publishing industry. And today is one of those days. So sit back and enjoy the panel that we put together. For those of you that don't know, Sensi Magazine, we have over 280 magazines editions that have been out throughout the country in 15 major markets. And one of the things that we noticed during the pandemic time is that there is certainly more that we can do as a brand to make an impact. And a lot of the people in our realm and in our brand have amazing roots when it comes from entertainment world and music. And I can tell you, all of them are cooler than I. And I've been introduced to some music over the last year that I never in a million. I come from Republican politics, so I can tell you, the last place in the planet when I was growing up where I thought I'd be would be sitting on a panel right now with such amazing leaders in what I would consider to be the forefront of the cannabis and music industry. So today we put together something special, and I have a few guests here, some of my friends, to discuss this. And one of the challenges that we face in society right now is what we'll call systemic disparity. And you see this often in the cannabis industry. You see it in the music industry. You see it in a lot of industries. So we sat back and said, hey, listen, what can we do to make an impact with our connections? So at Sensi Media Group, we have decided to put together a series of compilation albums that are highlighting some of the both new musicians that are in the industry and also some of the treasured editions that have been around forever in the cannabis and new age music scene. And a couple of those people are here today. So without any further ado, I want to draw attention to a couple of people that we have. First and foremost, our benefactor, Last Prisoner Project. For a lot of you that don't know, I actually spent 119 days in jail. I had a heroin addiction in my life. This is after working in presidential politics. And ironically, both my parents were law enforcement. So when I'm inside of jail, working my way out, I thought that I wouldn't necessarily face systemic problems and everything starting over. But 119 days in jail is nothing in compared to people that have been in prison for years and are still facing the challenges that we face, even with the laws changing. Last Prisoner Project is something that was co-founded by the D'Angelos, and I think it's amazing, right? So we have Andrew D'Angelo here, who's played a dramatic role in the actual compilation and building the program that we have to actually put out this relief compilation album. So Andrew, if you don't mind, talk to me a little bit about Last Prisoner Project. Tell me what it is that y'all do over there and why it matters and why we can actually do something to make real change. Andrew, thanks for joining us this morning.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be on this panel with such amazing leaders and people working on this issue. Last Prisoner Project was a vision that has manifested in the last year and a half, but really was something that Steve and I have been working on for 40, 50 years. When you've been in the cannabis trade as long as we have, a lot of your friends and family get busted and they get into the justice system. And we had to deal with that before cannabis was legal over and over again. And you know, you develop protocols to make sure that the contagion does not spread and that you can get your people out of prison as quickly as possible and you can mount a legal defense for them and try to get through the case, right? When cannabis became legal and we opened Harborside, we had a program where patients who could not afford their medicine could write a letter to a cannabis prisoner and get a voucher for free medicine at Harborside. And that was one way that we tried to maintain a connection with our brothers and sisters in prison. then a couple of years ago, Steve's in a boardroom. We're about to make cannabis legal for all adults in California. That movement's spreading to other states. There's a lot of exuberance. Investors, publicly traded Canadian markets are starting to take a look at cannabis. And Steve's in a boardroom with people talking about making hundreds of millions of dollars growing and selling weed. And he got a phone call. Got a phone call from an old friend of ours named Chuck, and Chuck was in prison when he called my brother that day. And Chuck was serving 4 years for 14 pounds of weed. He drove 14 pounds of weed from California to Pennsylvania. He got caught, and he was serving 4 years for that. First offense, I think it was his first offense. It might have been his second offense, but Chuck has been a hippie for 30 years, and he's been growing weed and playing guitar and fixing people's cars. That's what he does. And he's a lovely human being and certainly does not belong in prison. So when Steve got that phone call in the middle of this meeting with all these people talking about starting publicly traded cannabis companies, this idea for Last Prisoner Project hit him all at once. And my brother has these ideas that hit him all at once sometimes that are quite brilliant. And this was one of them. And what we found when we dug into this issue was there were lots of different groups working on this issue, and they're all important. They're all important for us to support and to donate to and to spend our time helping. But Last Prisoner Project, we saw a need for a group that only focuses on cannabis prisoners, and that we have three basic missions. 1, get people out of prison. 2, expunge their records. 3, re-enter them into society. And we have a bunch of different programs that work on all 3 of those things. And we raise money. Basically, to get people out of prison, you have to hire lawyers, and you have to submit clemency petitions, and you have to do appeals. If they haven't exhausted their appeals, sometimes you can win the case on appeal, or at least create a better outcome. That's not prison. And so that's what we do. And we're still a baby organization. The community has really responded to Last Prisoner Project, and I hope other groups are also seeing more energy, particularly in the last several months. And we're just getting started. And 40,000 that we know of nonviolent cannabis prisoners. There's probably a whole bunch of others that have other charges and complexities in their cases. We have people serving life in prison for very small amounts of cannabis. We have military veterans who serve their country. They're serving hard time for small amounts of cannabis because they need it for their medicine. So, and I'm happy to report Last Prisoner Project, we've successfully gotten a few people out of prison, particularly with COVID. We've really tried to use COVID strategically to get people out. Not to say that none of these folks should have been locked up in the first place. And all of our prisoners, not just cannabis prisoners that are suffering, need to be out for COVID. But so that's what Last Prisoner Project is, and I'm just so thankful for the community and all the activists and all the people that have been helping us so far.
Now, a question for you, Andrew. Let's say I'm a cannabis user. I understand that there's a problem. I understand that the problem's systemic, but I think there's nothing I can do to make an impact in this. The prison system, government, we know how that works. It's going to take forever, but we know that's not the case. So just as an everyday person who partakes in the industry in any way, what is something that I could do to get involved in Last Prisoner Project to actually make a measurable impact?
Great question. Well, we've tried to answer that question as simply as we can for folks. So if you go to lastprisonerproject.org/get involved, I think it is, or it might be get active, one of those two. It's also on our homepage. It's easy to click through, and there's lots of different ways. If you don't want to donate money, we'll take $1. We'll take $5. All those donations help. A year ago, Last Prisoner Project didn't have any money in the bank. Now we have 6 figures in the bank. So, and most of that small donations. I think our biggest donation to date is, well, I think we've just gotten our first 6-figure donation or pledge from a cannabis company. They're gonna do that over a long period of time in our Roll It Up for Freedom program. So if you're a cannabis company and you want to help, we have programs we developed really easy for you. Your dispensary, you can jump in and help. if you're a manufacturer or grower, we have several different programs that are easy to sign up for. Doesn't cost you any money up front. You can pay over time.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, if you're just a regular person, and you don't have a lot of money, or you don't want to donate, or you want to do something a little different, of course you can volunteer for different ways on our website. But one of the things I encourage people to do is become a pen pal for a prisoner.
Brilliant.
When you write a letter to a prisoner and begin a pen pal relationship with a prisoner, it is one of the most rewarding things that you can do in your life. When I'm having this cool letter exchange, and I send books to people I write letters to. You know, the prisoners need books, they need stimulation, they need, and you know, depending where you're locked up, there's different things you can do for prisoners. You know, sometimes you just send them $5 for their commissary so they can get a little bit better food, or a face mask or some hand sanitizer. Those little things really make a big difference when you're locked up. You know, if you're locked up and the only way you can get a face mask is through your commissary, and somebody through Last Prisoner Project sends you $5 so you can get a face mask, that makes a huge difference in your life. People don't understand that makes a huge difference in your life. Or you get a letter from somebody who's like, look, I've never met you before in my life, but I'm sorry you're locked up for weed. And let me tell you what's going on in my life and some of the struggles I'm having too. And I want to learn about you, and tell me about what your life and your family was like. And tell me what it's like to be locked up in prison, and maybe we can ease each other's pain a little bit. And so that's one of my favorite ways that I like to because it's personal. It's not just sending money to a group like us. It's personal, and you have a real connection with somebody. And some of these pen pal relationships that people have last for years and years, and people get out of prison and they become your friend. And it's a special kind of relationship. And, you know, being a pen pal is sort of a lost art these days. But when you're in prison, letters are sort of a lifeline. So that's one great way for people to jump in and help.
I'm so thankful for that, Andrew, just that opportunity, and that the story started literally with the pen pal situation in some regards, with people coming in and getting that support at Harborside just for writing that letter. So I couldn't thank you and your brother so much for impacting not only this industry, but for people that have kind of been forgotten, that have been part of this industry one way or the other from the beginning. So I encourage all of you that are out there today to strongly consider writing letters to those in prison. That is something that you can connect them to the outside. I know when I was in jail, if it wasn't for somebody by the name of Diana writing me a letter literally in the first week, I thought I pretty much would have lost hope in my life. And although this was just over a decade ago, that's how long it took me, with all of my history and background, to be able to recover from the time that I spent in jail. So every little bit matters, Andrew, and I really, really appreciate what you're doing. On that note, Tay, in our brand, one of the co-founders of Sensi, who also is an attorney and a lawyer, and has been involved in the cannabis industry and in defense for quite a while. And, you know, if you noticed during the protest in Denver, Tay was one of those who went online and said, hey, listen, I would like to represent anybody that's going to jail right now for protest, and do what I can to get them out of the judicial system. Because we know once somebody starts in the judicial system, whether it's for protesting or it's for a petty cannabis crime, you get that DOC number. Your life changes from that point on. Institutionalization starts at that point on. And, you know, one of the things that I find is interesting is this intersection between the music and entertainment industry and the cannabis industry, and what would be considered, you know, in various cultural appropriations that have happened throughout the years. And what I found was very interesting when I first met Tay Darnell, I did not know his background. I did not know, which I'm sure he'll share here, what kind of background he grew up in. And what I can say is this: what you see with your eyes is not always the reality, right? So I encourage everybody to take a moment and get to learn the people that are next to you, people that you work with, people like Andrew D'Angelo, who just shared his time and has shared 40 to 50 years of his life towards making an impact. Tay, you're one of those people everybody should know. You know, when I first came into Sensi Magazine, you were the president of the brand, just an absolutely treasured history. Did not know your history in the music industry and how you found a way to at least inspire what we are doing today. So Tay, if you don't mind taking a few moments to tell me just a little bit about your history, and when it comes down to this interesting intersection between music and cannabis, and then from a lawyer perspective, what you see are some of those impactful things that are being done right now with the very first steps that we're taking today. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Yeah, you know, contextually, it's an amazing thing to be sitting where we are today. My music background started after college. I was fortunate enough to start this new age record label that somehow became one of the biggest in the world. You know, we won many Album of the Year awards, distributed internationally, and did very well until Napster hit. We had a lot of artists that were doing things like World Beat Electronic and Celtic music and things that didn't tour. So when music became free overnight, I had my first major loss of income occur. Ironically, at that same time, when I left the music industry, I became one of the general counsel for the biggest NFL agency in the country. And as I was doing this, a good friend of mine, a fellow attorney, was really the first cannabis attorney in Colorado. He started an organization called Sensible Colorado in early 2000, named Sean McAllister. Sean called me from Breckenridge, where he was the first person to get cannabis legalized in a city, in a town in Colorado under our constitutional amendment that had passed in 2000. Well, he led a lawsuit in 2007 that effectively created the dispensary model in Colorado. There was an arbitrary and capricious ruling that had a cap on the amount of patients a caregiver could have, and they won on that on this particular hearing, which nobody thought they'd win. And suddenly, we had the ability to have dispensaries on every corner in every city of Colorado. He called me and said, "I'm overwhelmed. I'm the only person doing this. Would you take on cannabis cases?" Well, but from a political or from a social economic perspective, I came from a house with 20 people in it, 20 plus people in it. Half my family was Native American, a quarter of it's Black. I had 10 boys in my bedroom. I've got a brother doing life in prison because of the impact of our criminal justice system. We didn't grow up wealthy. I played basketball well enough and tested well enough that somehow my ACT score got me a full ride to college. Otherwise, I wasn't going to go. And the same thing happened with law school. So all of these fortuitous things aligned. I ended up started taking on cannabis cases in early 2000 and opening dispensaries across the city, which is where we also encouraged the state to develop the first regulated model in the world. So Sean, myself, a couple other attorneys led the initiative to create the first regulated medical marijuana cannabis program in the world. We helped draft HB 1284 and SB 109. This is back in 2009-ish that we finally got this through. For me, I was doing this more from the civil rights perspective. You know, I've seen the impact of the war on drugs. I had seen its impact on my family. You know, my cousin brought the Crips to Denver back in the 80s, to give you an example. My cousin was incredibly bright, incredibly brilliant kid. The best way to make economy for him was to create this gang warfare environment where you fought for territory, and the thing you fought for was drug territory. And it's enabled this system that, you know, impacts communities that poverty is prevalent in a way that they can kind of keep it status quo. If you look at the impact on drug arrests, you know, for instance, I think these stats are a couple years old, I believe, but I think there were 663,000 arrests for cannabis. This is just cannabis. I'm not talking about all drugs. I think all drugs should be legal. That's a separate note. But I think there was 1.6 million arrests for drug law violations in the US a couple years ago. But 663,000 cannabis arrests, of which I think 600,000 plus were for possession. And then when you look at the statistics underneath that, although the population representation is 13% African American, 26% of the arrests were of African Americans. So I think we're seeing socially what the impact of the war on drugs and its fallacy has had on society. When Ron approached me about Sensi 4 years ago or 5 years ago, I really saw an opportunity to use media as a vehicle to bring people together, to use media as a vehicle to unite an industry like cannabis in things that spread across the social spectrum. And to me, the biggest and first point of emphasis needs to be its impact on the criminal industrial complex. It's a for-profit mechanism that is really just built to keep society unstable and violent. So just recently, an old friend of mine, ironically from the music industry back in the day, Tuva, has joined Cincy as one of our reps. And Cincy, Tuva approached me about this concept and how he thought we could engage in an entertainment or use an entertainment vehicle to really start raising awareness about things. He started reaching out to the different artists, and you see several of the incredible contributors here on this call right now, but just put together an incredible compilation. And I see this as kind of a phase one of getting the message out. There's going to be a lot of work that has to go into making this successful. But when you look at something like music, this is something that people will be able to put on in the background and stream on Amazon and stream on whatever, and know that they're contributing money to something, right? It's an effortless way for people to be engaged, to participate, and to actually impact the change that we're all trying to impact. So this is phase one. I'm incredibly grateful to the artists that have contributed to this, and the crossover with music is just so obvious. Cannabis is the ultimate creative mechanism in the world. I know very few artists that either don't smoke it or are fans of it in some way, shape, or form.
I'm creative right now because of cannabis, right? So I appreciate that point, Tay.
That's right. And artists have also felt the impact. They've seen this live and on tape, not only at their concerts where there may be over excessive enforcement of people smoking on the grounds or arresting people for selling whatever it is at the concert. So there's just this logical merge right now that makes so much sense. And then when you plug in the Last Prisoner project, Stephen and Andrew and what they've done with Harborside has been really what I would consider the model for what a cannabis business should look like. And it's what we built Cincy on too. It's this theory of give first. And when you give, you often receive. So we're setting up this mechanism where the artists here are giving. These artists have contributed effort and work and the brilliance of their art to this project. And we're now going to contribute the effort and work that we can to get the message out and try to get this thing out there to make a difference.
I couldn't agree more, Tay, on this. And, one thing I'll say for those of you that are listening, if you go to CencyMag.com/presents, PRESENTS, that's how creative I am. I was able to spell that correctly. CencyMag.com/presents. You'll be able to get a preview of the album. There's 25 songs on this. And I would say that it's a darn near perfect blend of what you consider that modern age EDM music and then historic roots music. And there's links on there for you to buy the album as well. And it's one of those things. I'm honored to be part of this. And Tuva Hank, I couldn't thank Tuva enough on behalf of the Cincy team and on behalf of the industry, both music and cannabis, for having the foresight with you, Tay, to put together these compilations, and the proceeds from these compilations are going to cause, in this regards, it's about making that reform in the judicial system. We just had a question come in. I know we're supposed to wait till the end for questions, but I guess this fits right now between Andrew and Tay. When do we think that all the prisoners that are in the United States judicial system for these cannabis related crimes are going to be released where it's applicable? That's the first silence we've had all day, right? And that pause right there.
Well, because it's just so hard and there's so many, and the criminal justice system is the hardest system to reform. And we don't need to reform it. We need to transform it. And transformation is a whole bigger bite off the apple than a little reformation. And the interests that want to keep the criminal justice system just the way it is, as you said, Tay, so well, in terms of keeping a violent society violent. Okay, we need to transform. So I want to say, oh yeah, in 6 months we'll have it done. No, I can't say that with intellectual and emotional honesty. I'm saying a generation, maybe. It might take a generation to unwind all this. Now, if we have a lot of energy and we raise a lot of money and we work really hard, maybe faster than that. But a long time to get to this point. It's going to take some time to unwind it. There's a lot of things we can do to accelerate it. LPP works on that, whether it be expungement laws that are passed when legalization's done, or whether it be retroactive measures that are in the law, so it makes our work a lot easier. Those things are working.
I think of the catalyst, right, Andrew? We're looking for catalyst right now, and even coming together like this certainly serves as a catalyst to speed that immeasurable amount of time up to bring it closer. Tay, I noticed. Sorry to interrupt. You were mentioning.
No, you're fine. It takes that energetic push, though. Like Andrew says, we were able to write in some expungement dynamics into the Colorado laws that were effective in mitigating very minor cannabis crimes. So it's kind of that inch to take a mile.
Avoiding the criminal system, more or less, in that regards, Tay? Or is it just at the end?
Well, I think, I hope it's not a generation, but I wouldn't be surprised if it is. But I'll say this, when we see the action of the people make an impact, to equate it to protests we saw in early June over this merciless killings by police that have gone on not just once, that have gone on now for 400 years, right? It was private citizens and police. It took the actions of millions in a state of justified rage to make an impact. So to give an example, when I offered to defend the protesters for free and to take as many as I could, when we built this army of people that got behind me just saying that, we were able to get the city of Denver to dismiss all the charges against these protesters.
So you created the movement, and the movement itself changed the dynamic of the legal process you would have normally had to go through, more or less, correct?
That's right. So I think
so powerful.
It's going to take that level of movement to continue. And like Andrew said, the complexity is people like Jeff Sessions, who lives in a state like Alabama that's funded by the prison industrial complex, that has big prison industries funding legislation to make tougher on crime politics. You have the Democratic Party in this election nominating Joe Biden, a big tough on crime Democrat who's an anti-drug zealot, and Kamala Harris, a former prosecutor who put thousands for drugs. So this is what you're dealing with on both sides.
You bring me to a good point, right? Like right when you just said that, looking at the election cycle, I've learned a lot from the next person, Rue Johnson, just about the industry of impact. I grew up trying to make an impact and take the potential energy and turn it into kinetic and create the catalyst like you and Andrew are discussing. Then I had my first conversation with Rue, and Rue's got an absolutely treasured history in the music world and social impact world. And matter of fact, for those of you that like hip hop music, if it wasn't for Rue Johnson on this right there, you wouldn't have hip hop music in Denver. I could tell you that it wouldn't be as cool as it is. But Rue said to me, she said, Chris, we can sit here and posture, we can sit here and talk about things. In order to make a change, you need to actually make change, real change with a real plan and a litmus test always about what matters on society, but then be willing to take a stand, not just for what you're going to do, but what you're against as well, because just talking about what you're going to do and not standing against something, it's only half the battle. So Rue, so graciously, we've had plenty of conversations about this. She really helped me tie the impact that can be made from things like music, even our magazine, into real world social impact and vexing issues. Rue, thank you so much for joining us today. This is your wheelhouse here. We have a music compilation that's coming out with some great people that are on this today. We're looking at it as a first step. But tell me, where does that fit into actual change when it comes down to society and closing the gaps and eliminating some of the barriers that we both agree are out there?
Well, thank you for having me. And I love that Tay was getting really wound up right there. Thank you for bringing that, because I think, there's a lot of things that we're all thinking. So really I love listening to this conversation. And it's so important that this is the conversation that we're bringing forward, especially in the times of these social uprisings, and finding that there are a lot more people, who are sort of new to the acts of revolution, if you will. And so we have to be able to create language that these folks can use and understand, so that they have the history of why so many of these programs like the Last Prisoner Project and other programs are so important, right? Because many of these folks are not necessarily privy to the living history that some of us had when we can remember when people would get thrown under the jail for like $20 worth of weed, right? So we have to break, because now in Colorado where I live, and in California and other places, you can go and grab a cup of coffee and grab a joint just as easy as you could grab a cup of coffee. So it's so important to really bring this conversation of history to the forefront. And my work in the music industry has always been about community, and it's always been about creating a platform for people who want to express themselves in ways that are not traditionally a part of the process. So, musicians have always been at the start of the revolution. I mean, conversations around social injustices and uprisings are always taking place at the dance halls or at the Casbahs or all these places where musicians and artists congregate and come together. So I always say that music and cannabis are like first cousins, they just work very well together. And during the times of like legalization, there is, like Tay mentioned, quote, legalization, but the decriminalization of the plant and of the usage of the plant is such a big part of the conversation that we have to still have, which of course feeds into the greater conversation of racial injustice that takes place in this country in general. So, a lot of my work, because of that, really helps to bring the idea home that we are uniting as a community, specifically around whether it's around music or it's around cannabis, but these things work together. And an oppressed part of any of us is the oppressed part of all of us, right? So when you say create a social impact and what does it mean to make real change? Well, first of all, you have to name your oppressor, right? And it's not really like people are saying, oh, there's people who are in prison for smoking weed or for selling weed. It's being direct, like Tay mentioned, Jeff Sessions, being from a state that directly benefits and profits from the prison industrial complex, and then have the nerve to actually be against marijuana, and the entirety of the war on drugs in totality. Don't get me started on Reagan, because I will literally never stop. So when we talk about like the music and the work that I do, what we see are that people want to be able to experience their life in a way that is free from oppression, and we want to create freedoms from those who it's been stolen from. And the way that you do that is by centering the margins, and we look at who's been on the outside and who deserves to have information and education campaigns and all of these different things we're doing centered on what has actually happened. And in this case, those who have been convicted of petty marijuana crimes or marijuana crimes in general are the ones we should be centering on. And I think this compilation project can really make an impact because it allows artists to have a platform for speaking their mind in their language, musicians, artists, etc. And it also allows the educational impact for people to understand that, yes, there are still places in this country where you can be arrested and thrown in actual prison, for marijuana, because it hasn't just gone away. And we get rocked to sleep. I mean, we get rocked to sleep because many of us live in very liberal places in terms of like California and, Portland and Colorado and all of these other things. But then if you go to the South or if you go to any other place, it's not like that. But we tend to forget that. And we tend to operate using this jargon and this like insider language and conversation when there's a lot of people we need to reach on the margins who don't have access to this information in the ways that we do. And the way that you reach them is with music, and it's with art, and it's with things that they can connect with on a real soul level. So they're listening to this music that touches their energy and touches their soul because that's what it's designed to do. And then you couple that with education and really bring home the point of connecting with the Last Prisoner Project and other organizations that are doing this kind of very impactful work. So I think this compilation album is a really incredible opportunity to meet folks where they are and, introduce them to a whole other world of activism.
Ru, you bring up so many amazing points. I know when Tuva came to me and said, hey, listen, Chris, we want to put out this compilation. I said to him, listen, Tuva, if mixtapes work, I would probably still be with my 4th grade girlfriend. But you see, it wasn't necessarily about that angle, right? And here's my story leading into the musicians. I worked in Republican Party politics, and one of the races I did was Haley Barbour down in Mississippi, right? Now, Haley Barbour, Republican, former chair of the Republican National Committee. I was very instrumental in unseating a Democrat, Ronnie Musgrove down there. And, you know, I feel bad about it. Matter of fact, going to jail, being a heroin addict has been much easier to recover from than being a Republican operative, which on the other side of the equation, you get all the skepticism from people because of. But when I was down in Mississippi, what I found was interesting was I was at a polling place, and what you saw was a line of all white people. And then you had the other line on the other side of the room, all black people lined up, right? And I'm sitting here, I'm like, is there still segregation? So I asked, and they're like, well, no, it's not segregated. That those are polling places for those wards over there. Those are polling places for those precincts over there. And systemically, the actual society was separated out. So even when legalities and change happens, it doesn't necessarily change the systemic conditions of even the neighborhood you grow up in. So it almost had this secondary notion of segregation down in the South in modern era. And I certainly didn't help it all by just simply asking a question and doing nothing about it. Right. So what I found interesting is in Mississippi, the only place that I went to where everybody was in the same place, I'm talking every gender, every race, every ethnicity, was at the large concerts that were happening in what we'll call them the Bayou concerts that they had down there in the South during the races. And that showed me right there that music truly does take potential and turn it into kinetic energy. And there's a way to do things with this. And I'm so graced by the presence of some of the musicians we have on today, whether it be Kofi from Jaw Kings, we have iStar, Beats Antique, Sidecar Tommy and all that, Carl John, amazing performers. Want to ask a couple questions and have some input from you all on this. I'm going to start with, let me see, I'm going to start with iStar, right? I believe you guys have a new album dropping or something, right? Is that true? Right. Look at that. That's excitement.
We're on music.
Yeah. And you're a husband and wife duo. Is that the situation?
Yes,
Now,
sir.
already that poses a lot of challenges, right? Ask my ex-girlfriend that there's an ex for a reason. We had a business together. I couldn't sing, but, you know, I find it very interesting. Your music is phenomenal. Very interesting. It's engaging. Why do you go down the path that you do in music, and why is it the audience that you have loves your music as much as I do? What is the impact? What is your why that you came into this, both of you?
Man, first of all, it's so good to be on with you all. Peace and respect, and much gratitude for everything you do in the world. Well, you know, for us, we've both been doing music a really long time, and when we met, which will be 14 years ago next month, it was like the collision of two styles that we'd been cultivating in our own path. Aradhana, more of a singer-songwriter, and please feel free to.
Yeah. You know, I started playing guitar when I was 17 and writing poetry and needing to express all of my, you know, young adult angst and all of that. And singer-songwriter, folky rock kind of genre, but I was also super influenced by hip hop just from when I was young. You know, it's what my brother was listening to, and then when I heard the Lauryn Hill Unplugged album, that was like, that changed.
That did it for you? It did it for a lot of us, I think.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because, you know, she was playing guitar, and that, like, I started integrating hip hop into my acoustic guitar singing, you know, way before I even met him. So then when we met.
Yeah. And for me, it was all hip hop and spoken word from, you know, 1990 on, you know, and just the way that the poetry got to my soul instantaneously planted that seed. So, you know, we have been fusing our genres, and I honestly do believe Lauryn Hill is the originator of the style that we have carried forward, which we call folk hop. But basically being able to rhyme and sing over minimal instrumentation all the way up to full band or production style. So yeah, and just to be able to put as we've all been touching on, to put the message and the prayers, the invocations for the world that we want to create, and to put that out there and let that get into people's subconscious and integrate it. So yeah, music has always been there. Cannabis, like look at cannabis and the jazz movement in you know, the 20s. And then of course, racism was a driving force of prohibition. And so that's, you know, it's all very intertangled. And we live in North Carolina, which is a very
I was going to bring that up, right? So you experienced it on the front line day to day. You couldn't live in a state that's more diametrically opposite than the kind of movement of the music that you have. And even when you look online, you have local fans, right? So like, I mean, so obviously you're doing something right. I really appreciate you guys bring a compilation to our compilation. And it's rooted in something that matters. So I'll get back to you shortly. I want to jump over to Kofi Alexander, Jah Kings. For those of you that don't know the Jah Kings, I could say, I was telling him earlier, I play the music in the morning. For all my friends and family, they know I get stuck on songs. So some of you have actually played out in my inner circle. I'm sorry for that. But you know, Jah Kings has had such an amazing history. I mean, everywhere from when I lived in Chicago. I believe you guys won some Chicago Music Awards over there. But Kofi, you know, your history in the reggae music scene is second to none. What is different now in terms of the modern music industry that you see in its attachment in reggae to the cannabis world than when you first started as a musician, Kofi?
Well, first I want to salute you all for your courage to stand strong now. I'm very honored to be among you. I'm recovering from a recent stroke as of July 5th. And cannabis to me has always been medicine. There's a receptor for it in our brain, a gland, and it's helping me in my miraculous recovery with my family. Of course, the Rastafarians, with the help of Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, Bunny Wailer, help bring these songs with prayers and like psalms. That's really what got me into it. Growing up in Gary, Indiana, in the same neighborhood as the Jackson 5, and raised with a high level of music at a young age. My mother is an incredible singer, and my auntie, my family is very talented. My mom's range was that of Gladys Knight. We raised in the church, you know, where the music fed your soul. Growing up, particularly in the 60s, the music is like, you would hear a great song, great rock songs, great R&B songs on a radio station. A good music is good music. And particularly for this compilation, we are of a troubadour quality where music helped open people's minds and move public opinion and speak the messages of the people in the streets. That's what I love about reggae. Yeah. Particularly, it seems reggae now has become soft in the sense of kumbaya vibe, you know. That's what I love about hip hop. Hip hop spoke about the injustices in the streets. You know, don't touch me, I'm close to the edge, you know, I'm about to lose my head. And that's what reggae music has done for me. When I was in college having difficulties, those songs reconnected me to the struggle of Black people. I'm indigenous, I have Blackfoot Lakota in my family, Cherokee and Choctaw. I Sundance at Wounded Knee on the Pine Ridge Reservation with Crazy Horse and Black Elk's family. Reggae is very well accepted among Native Americans because it comes out of struggle. And so the music is prayers to us. It's not a throwaway music. And that's, I'm honored to have our song Family as a part of this compilation, because we know families have been busted up because of this madness.
I couldn't agree. Your statements are so amazing, Kofi, and your song Family is fantastic. And, you know, just talking to iStar a moment ago, and their Song of Freedom, I believe is the one that you have on the album, Song of Freedom, and then going over to Family, those things are so interconnected. Family, freedom. The one place that we're all supposed to be free is in our own family. And what I find is interesting, you have such a treasured background, Kofi. We could have seen you in pretty much any genre of music, whether it be from the church to the hip hop persuasion to the Jacksons and all of that. And you chose reggae, and you've consistently through your group kept the story real. And, you know, as opposed to going and talking the kumbaya, you decided to focus on some things that are that make us all the same. We all spend so much time in society focusing on what makes us different, but it's generally, we're here today celebrating what makes us the same. And your music does that. And I really, really appreciate you taking the time. And I could tell you, you know, you mentioned that you were a victim of a stroke. I'm very thankful that you're here with us today and are able to carry on the traditions and stand for what you believe in. And I promise we won't let you down, Kofi, in terms of our goals. So I really appreciate your time here with us today. I'm going to jump over to somebody, Carl. You know, Carl, you're an author, for the best of my understanding, as well, Carl. I believe Journey Home might be the book or something of that nature that you have. Journey Home might be the book. Oh, I got a little feedback there. But, you know, Carl, it's like this. I'm a fan of what you're doing. You're different in your music than a lot of the music I hear in the industry. You get somewhat of a different persuasion. It's coming from a different starting point. Tell me a little bit about what your roots in music are, Carl. What's your motivation when it comes down to your writings and performance?
Oh, man. And first off, thanks for having me here, and thank you guys for all that you do. And I mean, everybody on this panel. My roots in music, I mean, I started early. My roots were in, you know, country and Americana and hip hop and everything across the board, right? But I was a late bloomer in my artistry. Actually, I started, I was born in the Midwest in Indiana and moved to the Bay Area, you know, and I left when I was 17 and came up in as an entrepreneur, you know. In fact, I spent most of my life that way. And I was in Las Vegas. I started a restaurant and a gaming bar out there. And it was funny. We were talking about segregation earlier. Vegas was kind of segregated when I moved here from the area, San Francisco Bay Area. I thought that. You know,
you're breaking up a little bit, Carl, just so you know.
I think we lost him.
Yeah, he's just breaking up a little
Can
bit.
you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you fine, Carl. Maybe if you turn off your video, it may make it easier.
So, for a second. Okay. How's that?
You sound fine. Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep,
Yeah.
totally fine.
Okay. So anyhow, I had a restaurant that I started out here, and I met now my best friend actually there one night, who's a black man, and he asked me why I started this place, and I brought people together. I had amazing chefs there. I had amazing music, had live music, had art. I said, you know, I brought people together in the taste of life, you know, music, art, food, to, you know, find the commonality. Okay. I said, I made this for like you and all my friends, like to bring people together. And in 2008 to 2010, when the real estate market fell apart, and lost everything, went through divorce, custody battle with my kids, you know, how people go through changes. And during that time, like right before then, I had a place in Taos, New Mexico. And in Taos, I picked up guitar. And that's when I first started to play. And when everything wiped out that I built up, I went, well, if I could choose to create my life all over again, what would I do? And that's what brought me on my path of music. And I always say, you know, as a musician, I'm a heck of more of a mystic and a poet, you know? And so I feel like whatever I want to create right now in music is a collaboration or with myself, is to bring people together, because I feel that, you know, music is a mantra, and we can, you know, find our commonality through this artistry. You know, that's why I think it's beautiful that you're putting out this this project to raise awareness because people then, can be soft served, information and think differently.
What I think is
and in
interesting,
that,
Carl, you said you started late in music, right? Oh, sorry. You're coming in late. Sorry. You said you started late in music, right? So you didn't start in music when everyone else was younger. And I'm pretty sure that you played at the Venetian, and I live in Vegas, the Venetian, the Hard Rock, some of these places. And literally you've got award-winning music out there, and you didn't come up in the music world. So what you've been able to prove is the idea of the impact can be made at pretty much any point of your life if you follow your passion and point it towards something that matters. And I think that's amazing. How long ago did you start music?
Absolutely. It was about 8-9 years ago at this point. And literally that was it. I went from 4 houses to sleeping on an army cot. And I'm going to choose to reinvent my life. And if everything read, through quantum physics and our way and indigenous cultures that we choose to create in our life. And as I changed that, I believed and became this new thing. Things showed up like this. Within a few months, I recorded my first song. Within 6 months, I was opening up for Robin Thicke at the Venetian. Within a year, I was over in Nashville, Tennessee. And that's what I want to share with people. Like, we can choose to create. That's why I don't get caught up in the anger and the bitterness and the fighting and the strife. And it's like, okay, that's good. And this is where we've been, but where are we going? And what are we creating together? Because we have more in common than we have to separate us.
I love that, Carl. And that's a true inspiration. And, it's one of those things as people are coming out of the prison system, and we're looking for opportunities and creating them. Music has never been a fast track towards anyone. It requires talent. And then even if you have the most talent, a lot of work and passion and drive. So it's great to see people like you, Carl, that actually have, somewhat of a model that proves that even if you come from, some would consider a real estate industry much similar to prison. So even when you're leaving the real estate industry and jumping on over, you have opportunities in the music world. Which brings me over to you, Sidecar. Beats Antique, totally awesome. You can just look at your video and tell how awesome this guy is right here. There's no question about that. Sidecar, I'm interested. You've got to have a lot of motivation to create the music that you do. It's inspiring. It's unique. What drives you to be who you are? And tell me what makes Beats Antique different.
First of all, thank you for inviting me to all this. This has been a beautiful way to start my day. I woke up thinking it was 8:30 p.m. in the Bay Area because it's so dark out. Because it's so smoky and that just, I woke up sort of with a broken heart, and I can tell you that that's where my music comes from. I was heartbroken when I was a kid. I got into some fights because I was trying to help people and protect people that shouldn't have been messed with, and ended up having seizures for my entire life. So for 30 years, I've been dealing with seizures, pretty hardcore, and uncontrolled by the medical industry and all that stuff. So cannabis has always been a part of that for me. Once before I even knew that it was doing good, I was doing it to like both rebel and learn like love and compassion and stuff, and connect. So yeah, my epilepsy, or it's actually not epilepsy because it comes from traumatic brain injury. So my father passed away when I was in high school. Lots of things happened, and things do, they happen to us, and we have to figure out a way to respond, and it's different for everyone. And luckily, my parents were, super supportive. I've played music since I was a little baby. I grew up underneath the grand piano in my living room that my mom would play me to sleep to. So like, I just thought that that was normal. I thought that was just the way you were. I didn't realize that people didn't have those kinds of opportunities and those kinds of situations, you know. As I grew up, I started to see that for all the ways that I maybe as a person didn't know how to communicate or didn't know, you know, what was going on or what to say, both just as a product of growing up in Northern Virginia in white suburbia, you know, it's like you don't understand things, and then all of a sudden you start having a brain situation where you literally don't have the ability to retain stuff and keep stuff. I started to realize that music was the way that I could connect to people without having to stutter, without having to get over my words. And it's just I could share my heart, which has always been sort of my favorite part of me. And I think my journey in music just was as a response. And it constantly has been as a response. And, you know, I think that I've been given opportunities that other people haven't been given. And so I try to take those opportunities to share my heart, because for me, there's so much stuff happening that it's tragic, actually. We celebrate all this positivity, and we celebrate all these things, and at the same time it's a farce. So as my role in Beats Antique evolved, I realized that I was able to understand a bunch of different sub communities and things, and from traveling and using my music as my voice, I was able to meet a lot of different people. And so to me, Beats Antique was just a nod to all these people that I'd met and learned from ultimately. And a lot of them weren't Americans. A lot of them were people, you know, from other places and people that have other experiences. And then the people that I met in America that heavily influenced me seemed to be all people who were given a huge amount of challenges that weren't their fault. And I just think that, like, if you got a voice in music, or if you have a voice in anything, you know, choose something good to speak about and to share. And so Beats Antique is sort of this interesting, I mean, it's a weird anomaly. It shouldn't be successful. It'd be like, I don't know. It's just so bizarre that
that's what's
people are
amazing
like,
about
oh,
it.
cool.
Though, right?
Yeah, no, I know. And I can't even tell you what that is. Like, I don't even know.
Well, you know,
I've seen you live. You should definitely be successful.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, thanks.
I appreciate that. What you basically said, and I'll just summarize it as this, is that you took these tragedies in your life, and you chose how to react to them in a way that, luckily, we're on the same panel today. And one thing that I think that you brought up that was quite interesting is the idea that a lot of people face challenges that they're not actually responsible for themselves. And I can tell you this, my time in jail, all the politicians I may have got elected that we all hate now, whatever the situation may be, I am responsible for the challenges that I have caused in my life. And that's why I dedicate so much of my time towards solving the challenges that I can for people that didn't cause them for themselves. And I really respect you for bringing that home that way for that and what you shared there, Sidecar. And you know, it's like this, everyone. This is the first step, right? So we've proven that music makes an impact. But the compilation like this, if for those of you that, again, sensymag.com/presents, you'll notice of the 25 songs on there that you're not going to have a single artist that's anywhere even close to the artist that played before them. To the point, it matches somewhat. It was laid out perfectly, Tuva, so you got it in the right order. But for me, and the way my mind works, it is the ideal thing to get through a day, learning people's stories from their own unique place of creative expression. And for that, I don't have an ounce of creativity in the musical sense in my body. I know what sounds good, but you all have made it possible. You know, one thing that came across as a question, Andrew, is people are interested. They want to listen to the music. They want to make donations. They want to solve the problem for Last Prisoner Project. Are donations and stuff to your organization, as referred to as ancillary nonprofits, are those tax deductible? Are there benefits to them? Is it a 501c3 yet? Where do you live right now?
Yeah, Last Prisoner Project is a 501c3. We've just started our 501c4. We're not quite certified on the 4 yet, but we're getting there. What happens is the 4 lets you do a lot more policy and political work, and the 3 allows you to do support work for your
A
constituents.
social welfare organization, a 501c4, which I think is phenomenal. I'm glad that you brought that up. You know, for those who don't understand, the NAACP, for instance, they have the nonprofit, and then at their local levels, they have 501c4s, which allows for that social action to be done. And as a nonprofit, you can't advocate beyond maybe 20% of your time spent. So I really appreciate that you are doing what matters. So then people like Rue and with the large coalitions of people have something to point groups of people towards things that make an instrument of change. So for those of you that are interested in donating right now, there's a couple ways to donate. One of them is just by going to sensymag.com/presents and get the album, which would be amazing. And secondarily, right through Last Prisoner Project, you can reach out to Andrew. Andrew's out in the field right now working to help a lot of cannabis brands really cross the threshold for themselves and become more impactful. And we know his brother Steve has been, just like Andrew, a relentless advocate for both the industry and everyone alike. And Tay, you know, again, thank you so much for even bringing what would be considered your music persuasions into the Sensi family. You know, I know we have a series of compilation albums that we're going to be piecing together over the next year, all of which benefit from a different angle and approach. So we're going to be curating content that some of you have never heard before. Every single time Tuva or Richard sends me a song and I'm sitting there and they think I have this perplexed look on my face because I've never quite heard anything utilizing those instruments at the same time. I'm a boy from Rockford, Illinois, in the middle of the Midwest, and frankly, my dad grew up in country music, and my mom grew up in news talk radio. So I've learned more about life from listening to the stories of your life through music than many people have. So I really want to thank everybody for participating today. We're actually to the point where we've kind of breached the time limit, and they allowed us to do that because of our conversation. There's plenty more to come. I know that both tonight, maybe tomorrow even, there are some concerts. Last night was phenomenal. For all of you that are hanging out in the Hyperfair before I fell through the floor and ended up in the Matrix at the Hyperfair Arena. Don't know how that happened. But for those of you, make sure you check out the agenda, end up in the auditoriums at night, because that's where all the party's happening here. And let me just make sure we don't have, I believe I addressed all the questions through our conversation. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lead us out. And I want to thank everyone for coming. This is Family, which is one of the songs that Kofi brought up from the Jog Kings from the album. So if you don't all mind, I really appreciate your time. Let's give it all a wave for our audience, and we'll be back together. Remember, tonight in the auditorium, sensymag.com/presents. This is Chris Foltz, Sensi Magazine. Thank you so very much for your time.
Oh.
I feel cooler just listening to it.
Share this record, everybody. Share it with everyone. Let's get it out.
Peace, love, and harmony. I unity. Talking about the family.
Wow, what an amazing panel. Thank you all so much, not only for your time, but for your knowledge and caring.
Make sure that you head over to Auditorium B at 10:30 next to catch Jim Belushi, and Auditorium C will be back live at 11:15 with a panel called Investing for Impact, a multi-capital approach for the cannabis industry, presented by Jeff Trotter.
In.
Yeah, we need to know these things.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, see you all back here at 11:15.
Hope you're having a great day so far.
everyone, my name is Rosie, and on behalf of the Hemp Staff team, welcome to Emerge. We are professional recruiters in the hemp and cannabis industries. We specialize in upper management, technical, and C-level positions that you need to run your business. With our vast network, we can significantly decrease your search to hire time. If you want more information on our recruiting or training services, click the link and chat with someone now.
Hi, I'm Debbie, Executive Director of Americans for Safe Access. We are the nation's largest medical cannabis patient organization. Through education and activism, we have helped create the modern medical cannabis landscape in the U.S., and our work is far from over. We hope you will join us in supporting safe access for all Americans. Visit safeaccessnow.org to learn more.
Give your brand and products the traction you need to champion today's explosive edibles and ingestibles experience with Kushla's React. This rapid effect active cannabinoid technology is the first formulation that truly rivals the fast action of inhalables with an average onset time of 5 to 10 minutes or less. React now to upgrade your edibles experience and dosage with precision, convenience, and reliability.
Hello, I'm Karen Muller, the owner of Cannabis Business Brokers. We represent buyers and sellers of cannabis dispensaries, cultivations, and processing facilities. My team and I will strive to make your purchase or sale experience the most efficient, professional, and hassle-free in the industry. We look forward to meeting you in person and discussing all of your transaction needs.